There is a strange experience many people quietly go through but rarely talk about. It happens in ordinary places: a workplace meeting, a grocery store line, a family gathering, or even a casual conversation at a neighborhood cafe. You walk in calmly, not trying to draw attention, not trying to prove anything. And yet, something shifts in the room. People who were relaxed moments earlier suddenly become slightly guarded. A conversation pauses for a moment longer than usual. Someone who was confident suddenly starts explaining themselves more than necessary. Others become oddly quiet, studying you with subtle caution. You may not say much at all, yet the atmosphere changes in ways that are difficult to explain. For someone walking through life with genuine self-awareness and quiet faith, this reaction can be confusing. It can leave you wondering what you did wrong. The truth is often far simpler and far more revealing than most people realize. Sometimes people feel intimidated, not because of something you did, but because of something your presence quietly represents. Confidence that does not demand attention has a unique weight to it. When someone carries themselves with calm self-control and does not chase validation from everyone around them, it exposes a contrast that others cannot ignore. Many environments operate on subtle competition for approval, recognition, and control. People measure themselves through status, attention, and social influence. When someone enters that environment without participating in that invisible competition, it disrupts the rhythm that others rely on. The chosen one often moves differently, even without realizing it. Their calm is not an act. Their composure is not a strategy. It is simply the result of a life that has been shaped by reflection, faith, and a growing awareness of purpose. That kind of quiet authority can feel unsettling to people who depend on dominance, manipulation, or external validation to maintain their position in a group. They may not consciously understand why they feel uncomfortable, but their instincts react anyway. The human mind often tries to explain internal discomfort by assigning blame to something outside itself. Instead of recognizing their own insecurity, people sometimes interpret that internal tension as intimidation. They may tell themselves that you seem distant, serious, or unapproachable, even when you have done nothing to create that impression. In reality, what they are responding to is the contrast between your stability and their own uncertainty. It is not your voice that unsettles them. It is your stillness. It is not your actions that disturb them. It is your lack of anxiety in situations where they expect pressure and competition. This pattern has appeared throughout history, whenever someone carried a presence shaped by purpose. Scripture gives a clear example in the story of David and King Saul. Long before David ever held power, long before he ruled a kingdom, Saul sensed something different about him. David had done nothing aggressive toward the king. He had served faithfully, played music to soothe Saul's troubled mind, and carried himself with humility. Yet Saul began to feel threatened by David's presence, because he sensed something forming in David's life that he could not control. The moment people sense quiet authority in someone else, especially authority grounded in integrity and faith, it forces them to confront their own position in the world. Some respond with respect and curiosity. Others respond with discomfort and distance. The chosen one often becomes the target of reactions that seem irrational on the surface, but make perfect sense once you understand the deeper psychology behind them. When someone walks through life with an inner center anchored in God rather than in the approval of the crowd, their presence naturally carries a kind of gravity. It is not loud, it is not dramatic, but it is unmistakable. People who are comfortable with themselves often recognize this presence as peaceful and reassuring. Those who are wrestling with insecurity, however, may experience the same presence as pressure. They cannot explain why they feel uneasy, so they search for reasons to justify the feeling. Sometimes they convince themselves that you are judging them, even when you have said nothing. Sometimes they create emotional distance, not because you pushed them away, but because your calm forces them to look inward. This is why the chosen one must learn an important truth early in their journey. Not every reaction you receive is about you. Sometimes you simply walked into a room carrying a kind of peace that others have not yet found. And peace, especially the kind that comes from trusting God rather than chasing approval, can reveal far more about the people around you than it ever reveals about you. After a while, you begin to notice that the strange reactions you experience are not random. They follow patterns. Certain people respond with warmth and curiosity, almost as if your presence reassures them. Others respond with quiet respect, even if they cannot fully explain why. But then there are those who react with discomfort that seems completely out of proportion to anything that has actually happened. The moment you walk into a conversation, their tone changes. When you express a simple idea, they suddenly become defensive. If you remain calm while others argue, they appear irritated by your composure. For a long time, many chosen ones interpret these reactions as personal rejection. They assume they must be doing something wrong or carrying an attitude they cannot see. Yet the deeper truth is often far less personal and far more revealing. What people sometimes experience around you is not intimidation in the traditional sense. It is reflection. Your presence acts like a mirror, and mirrors have a peculiar way of revealing things people would rather not look at. When someone has spent years avoiding certain truths about themselves, even a silent reminder of those truths can feel uncomfortable. The chosen one frequently becomes that reminder without ever intending to. When you live with discipline, people who struggle with self-control may suddenly feel aware of their own habits. When you speak honestly without aggression, those who rely on exaggeration or manipulation may feel exposed. When you move through life with a sense of inner peace, individuals who are constantly restless may become aware of how unsettled they feel inside. None of this happens because you are judging them. In fact, you may not even be thinking about them at all. But human psychology has a fascinating way of interpreting reflection as confrontation. Instead of recognizing the discomfort as a signal pointing inward, people often project it outward. They tell themselves that you are the source of the pressure they feel. In their mind, it becomes easier to label you as intimidating, arrogant, or distant than to acknowledge the deeper reason for their reaction. The mirror effect explains why chosen ones sometimes experience resistance, even in situations where they have been nothing but respectful and supportive. Your authenticity contrasts sharply with environments built on appearance and performance. In spaces where people are accustomed to presenting carefully crafted versions of themselves, someone who lives with quiet honesty can feel disruptive. The difference is not loud, but it is unmistakable. Authenticity carries a certain steadiness that artificial behavior cannot easily imitate. And when people sense that difference, they often become aware of the gap between who they are and who they wish they were. For some individuals, that realization becomes motivation. They see something admirable and begin to grow. But for others, the realization becomes uncomfortable. Instead of allowing the mirror to reveal areas for improvement, they turn away from it entirely. This is when projection begins. Your discipline becomes intimidating. Your calm becomes cold. Your confidence becomes arrogant. The labels change, but the pattern remains the same. The discomfort they feel inside themselves is redirected toward you. Even in biblical history, truth has often produced this kind of reaction. When Jesus spoke with clarity and honesty, many people felt drawn to him because his words carried life and direction. Yet others reacted with hostility, not because he attacked them, but because his presence revealed truths they were trying to avoid. The Gospel of John describes this dynamic with remarkable simplicity when it says that people sometimes resist the light because it exposes what they would rather keep hidden. Light does not need to shout to reveal something. Its mere presence is enough. The same principle quietly appears in everyday life when someone walks in alignment with integrity and purpose. You do not need to lecture anyone about how they should live. Your consistency already speaks more clearly than words. And for people who are struggling internally, that silent example can feel like pressure they were not expecting to face. The chosen one eventually learns that this mirror effect is not something that can be controlled. You cannot dim your authenticity to make reflection less visible. Trying to do so would only disconnect you from the very qualities that allow you to grow in the first place. Instead, the wiser path is to recognize what is happening and refuse to take every reaction personally.
When someone responds to you with tension or defensiveness, it does not automatically mean you caused harm. Sometimes, it simply means that your presence illuminated something they were not ready to see. Over time, this understanding brings a certain kind of freedom. You stop carrying the responsibility of managing everyone else's emotional reactions. You begin to realize that your role is not to adjust your integrity to protect people from their own reflections. Your role is simply to live honestly, move with humility, and allow God to shape your life without apology. When you accept that reality, the mirror effect becomes less confusing. It becomes one more reminder that growth, truth, and authenticity will always reveal something in the people around you. And while some will step closer to learn from that reflection, others will instinctively step back from it. As time passes, the chosen one begins to recognize another pattern that explains many of the reactions people have toward them. It is not only the mirror effect that unsettles certain individuals. There is also something about peace itself that can quietly disrupt environments built on tension, competition, and emotional control. Many social dynamics operate through subtle forms of pressure. In workplaces, families, and social circles, influence often belongs to whoever can dominate a conversation, provoke a reaction, or manipulate the emotional tone of the room. Chaos, strangely enough, is easy to control. When people are reactive, anxious, or easily provoked, their responses become predictable. A sharp comment can trigger an argument. A rumor can create division. A small conflict can be expanded into a larger struggle for attention and control. But calm confidence does something very unusual in that kind of environment. It removes the levers that others expect to pull.
When someone carries genuine inner peace, they do not react the way people anticipate. Criticism does not provoke the same defensive response. Pressure does not produce panic. Manipulation does not easily gain traction. The chosen one often moves through life with a stability that gradually forms through faith, reflection, and experience. This stability is not loud or aggressive. It does not seek to dominate conversations or control situations. Instead, it appears as composure during moments that normally trigger emotional reactions. In a tense meeting, the chosen one might remain thoughtful rather than argumentative. During a disagreement, they may listen rather than escalate the conflict. When others rush to defend their reputation, the chosen one may simply remain steady, trusting that truth does not need constant reinforcement. For people who rely on emotional reactions to maintain influence, this composure can feel deeply unsettling. Their usual methods of control begin to fail.
Attempts to provoke anger or insecurity meet calm responses instead. Attempts to create competition meet quiet detachment. Without the expected reaction, the dynamic they are accustomed to suddenly stops working. The authority of peace is powerful precisely because it cannot be manipulated easily. It does not require constant explanation or validation. It simply exists as a steady center in situations that would normally produce tension. For individuals who thrive in chaotic or competitive environments, this kind of stability feels unfamiliar. They may interpret it as distance, arrogance, or even passive resistance. In reality, it is simply the result of someone who has learned to anchor their identity in something deeper than the opinions of the moment. Scripture describes this type of peace as something fundamentally different from the confidence the world typically promotes.
In the Gospel of John,
Jesus speaks about a peace that does not depend on circumstances or external approval. It is a peace that remains steady, even when situations become uncertain. When someone begins to carry that kind of inner stability, it quietly transforms how they move through life. Decisions become less reactive and more intentional. Conversations become less about winning and more about understanding. Challenges are approached with patience rather than fear. The chosen one often develops this kind of peace through seasons that were anything but easy. Hard experiences force a person to examine what truly anchors their identity. When someone has faced uncertainty, loss, or disappointment, and still chosen to trust God through those seasons, a different kind of confidence begins to form. It is not the fragile confidence that depends on constant success or public recognition. It is a quieter confidence, built on the understanding that purpose does not disappear when circumstances change. That understanding produces a presence that feels different from ordinary self-assurance. Instead of projecting dominance, the chosen one projects steadiness. Instead of demanding attention, they create space where clarity can emerge. But environments shaped by insecurity often interpret steadiness as a challenge. People who rely on controlling conversations may feel uncomfortable when someone refuses to participate in unnecessary conflict. Those who measure influence through loud opinions may feel unsettled by someone who speaks thoughtfully and only when necessary. The calm authority carried by the chosen one gradually changes the emotional temperature of the room, and not everyone is prepared for that shift. Some individuals will eventually adapt. They recognize that the peace you carry creates a healthier environment, and they begin to value that stability. Others, however, may withdraw or respond defensively because they sense their usual methods no longer work. In those moments, the chosen one must remember an important truth. Peace is not weakness. It is discipline. It is the result of learning when to speak, when to listen, and when to remain steady in the face of unnecessary tension. Over time, this quiet authority becomes one of the most defining qualities of a person walking in alignment with God's direction. It does not require control over others, because it begins with control over oneself. And in a world where many people operate through noise, reaction, and competition, someone who carries genuine peace will always appear unusual. To some, that steadiness becomes a source of reassurance and wisdom. To others, it becomes a reminder of how much noise they have been using to avoid stillness. Either way, the authority of peace continues to do what chaos cannot. It reveals the difference between strength that is loud and strength that is deeply rooted. By the time a chosen one begins to understand the mirror effect and the authority of peace, another layer of the experience slowly becomes clear. There is something about purpose itself that carries a kind of gravity. It is not something people can easily measure or explain, yet it changes the way a person moves through the world. Even before a chosen one fully understands their own direction, others often sense that something about their life is moving with intention. Purpose changes posture. It changes the way decisions are made. It changes what someone chooses to tolerate and what they quietly walk away from. While others drift between expectations, trends, and social pressures, a person who begins to discover their purpose moves with increasing clarity. That clarity is not always dramatic. Often, it appears in small but consistent choices. A chosen one may choose growth over comfort, integrity over convenience, patience over impulsive reaction. Over time, those choices form a visible pattern, and patterns are noticed, even by people who cannot articulate what they are seeing. Individuals who feel uncertain about their own direction sometimes experience a strange discomfort when they encounter someone who appears grounded in purpose. It is not necessarily jealousy, although it can resemble it. More often, it is the quiet realization that they themselves have been moving without a clear destination.
When someone without direction stands near someone who is beginning to walk with intention, the contrast becomes difficult to ignore. The chosen one may not be announcing their goals or explaining their path to everyone around them. In fact, many people who carry purpose speak less about themselves than others do. Yet their actions gradually reveal a pattern of consistency. They begin investing time differently. They guard their attention more carefully. They grow less interested in distractions that once consumed their energy. For people who are still searching for direction, witnessing this shift can feel unexpectedly heavy. Purpose has weight because it requires commitment. It requires sacrifice. It requires letting go of certain habits, certain environments, and sometimes even certain relationships. Many people sense that truth deep inside, even if they are not ready to face it yet. When they see someone who's begun making those difficult adjustments, it reminds them of decisions they themselves have postponed. The human mind often tries to reduce that discomfort by reframing what it sees. Instead of recognizing the presence of purpose, some individuals interpret the contrast as intimidation. They tell themselves that the chosen one is overly serious, overly focused, or somehow distant.
In reality, what they are feeling is the quiet gravity of a life that is moving towards something meaningful. The chosen one may not have all the answers about their future. Most people walking with purpose do not. But they have begun to align their choices with a deeper sense of calling, and that alignment gradually becomes visible. Scripture offers a powerful example of this phenomenon in the story of David. When the prophet Samuel anointed David, he was still a young shepherd. Nothing about his external circumstances suggested he would one day become king. Yet from that moment forward, something about David's life began to shift. The Spirit of God moved in ways that created a quiet distinction around him. Even before David held authority, people sensed that his life carried a different direction. Purpose does not always announce itself through titles or achievements. Often, it begins as an internal transformation that slowly reshapes the outward path. The chosen one begins to move with patience where they once rushed. They begin to evaluate opportunities differently. They become less concerned with immediate recognition and more concerned with long-term alignment. Those changes may seem subtle at first, but they accumulate over time, and people around them begin to notice. For individuals who feel lost or uncertain, witnessing that shift can create two very different reactions. Some become inspired. They see what disciplined growth looks like and begin asking questions about their own direction. They recognize that purpose is not reserved for a special few, but available to anyone willing to pursue it with sincerity. Others, however, experience the same contrast as pressure. They feel the weight of purpose without yet having the clarity to pursue it themselves. Instead of leaning into the inspiration, they distance themselves from the reminder. This is why chosen ones sometimes experience unexpected resistance from people they barely know. It is not necessarily about personality or behavior. Often, it is simply the presence of direction in a world where many people feel uncertain about where they are going. Purpose has a way of making that uncertainty visible. Over time, the chosen one learns that they cannot carry the responsibility of explaining their path to everyone around them. Purpose is rarely understood by a crowd while it is still forming. It grows quietly through discipline, prayer, and consistent decisions that align with what God is shaping within a person's life. The gravity others sense is not something the chosen one created intentionally. It is simply the natural result of a life that has begun moving towards something meaningful. And while some people will respond to that gravity with curiosity and encouragement, others will respond with distance because the weight of purpose reminds them of the direction they have not yet chosen. Eventually, after experiencing the mirror effect, the authority of peace, and the quiet gravity of purpose, the chosen one reaches an important realization. Not everyone will feel comfortable around someone who refuses to dim their integrity. No matter how kind, patient, or humble you remain, there will always be individuals who interpret your presence through the lens of their own insecurity. At first, This realization can feel discouraging. Many chosen ones spend years trying to adjust themselves in order to make others feel at ease. They speak less than they want to. They downplay their achievements. They hide their convictions in environments where honesty might create tension.
They learn to soften their voice, shrink their vision, and blend into situations where their authenticity once stood out. The intention behind this behavior is usually good. It comes from a desire to maintain harmony and avoid unnecessary conflict. Yet over time, something inside begins to feel misaligned. When a person constantly reduces themselves to protect others from discomfort, they begin to experience a quiet form of internal conflict. The chosen one may appear calm on the outside, but inside, they begin to feel disconnected from the very qualities that once defined their growth. Integrity becomes muted. Purpose becomes hidden. The clarity they once carried begins to feel distant. This is the moment when a deeper understanding begins to emerge. Intimidation often says more about the observer than the person being observed. The reactions people have toward you are frequently shaped by their own experiences, fears, and expectations.
When someone feels unsettled by your honesty,
It may be because they have become accustomed to environments where honesty is rare. When someone feels threatened by your discipline, it may be because they are struggling with habits they have not yet confronted. When someone reacts defensively to your calm confidence, it may be because they have learned to rely on emotional pressure to influence situations. None of those reactions are problems you can solve by shrinking yourself. In fact, trying to manage everyone else's emotional comfort by dimming your authenticity only creates deeper confusion. The chosen one eventually learns that growth requires a certain level of courage. Not the loud courage that seeks attention, but the quiet courage that refuses to abandon truth in order to gain approval. Walking in alignment with purpose means accepting that not every environment will welcome the clarity you bring. Some people will interpret it as wisdom. Others will interpret it as distance. The difference often depends on whether they are ready to grow themselves. Scripture captures this idea with a simple but powerful image. Jesus described light as something that is meant to shine rather than be hidden. Light does not force anyone to look at it, but its presence naturally changes the environment around it. When a room is dark, even a small amount of light becomes noticeable. Some people welcome that light because it helps them see clearly. Others prefer the darkness because it allows them to avoid certain truths. The responsibility of the chosen one is not to control how others respond to that light. The responsibility is simply to remain faithful to the role God has given them. This does not mean becoming arrogant or dismissive toward others. Humility remains essential. A person walking with genuine purpose understands that growth is an ongoing process, not a finished achievement. They remain open to learning, willing to listen, and careful not to judge others harshly. But humility is very different from shrinking. Humility acknowledges that every person has value. Shrinking denies the value of what God has placed within you. Over time, the chosen one begins to notice something remarkable. The same qualities that once made certain people uncomfortable begin to inspire others. Individuals who are searching for direction recognize the steadiness in your life and begin asking questions. People who have grown tired of superficial environments appreciate the honesty you carry. The very presence that once caused distance in some relationships becomes a source of encouragement in others. This shift happens gradually. The chosen one does not need to announce their purpose or defend their integrity. Consistency does that work quietly over time. As people observe the way you handle challenges, speak with clarity, and move with patience, they begin to recognize that your strength is not about dominance or pride. It is about alignment. It is about a life that has been shaped by faith, reflection, and a willingness to follow God's direction even when that path is not understood by everyone around you. When you reach this stage, something important changes inside. You stop asking why everyone reacts the way they do. You stop measuring your worth through the comfort of the crowd. Instead, you focus on walking faithfully in the direction God has placed before you. Some people will walk beside you with encouragement and respect. Others will remain distant, because the clarity of your life reminds them of questions they are not ready to face. Both responses are part of the journey. The chosen one does not need universal approval in order to move forward.
What matters is remaining grounded in humility, guided by purpose, and anchored in the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you are living the life God intended you to live. When you walk that path without apology, the light you carry becomes unmistakable. And while not everyone will feel comfortable in that light, the people who are meant to recognize it will see it clearly. So, now you've seen the pattern. Sometimes people react to you in ways that make no sense on the surface. You walk into a room quietly, and suddenly the energy shifts. Some people become distant, others become defensive, and a few seem oddly cautious around you, even though you haven't done anything to provoke it. For a long time, you might have wondered if something was wrong with you. Maybe you thought you were too serious, too quiet, too different, or somehow difficult for people to understand. But the truth you've explored through this message is much simpler and much more powerful. Sometimes the discomfort people feel around you has very little to do with you at all. Your presence reflects things people are not used to facing. Your peace interrupts environments built on chaos. Your discipline mirrors the areas where others still feel uncertain. And your purpose carries a quiet gravity that reminds people of direction they have not yet chosen. None of that means you should shrink who you are. None of that means you should hide the clarity, faith, and integrity that God is shaping inside your life. Light was never designed to blend into darkness just to make the room feel comfortable. Its purpose is to illuminate the space it enters, and while not everyone will welcome that light, the people who are meant to see it will recognize it immediately. If this message helped you understand something about your own journey, take a moment right now to support the channel. Tap the like button so more people can discover this message. Share it with someone who may be going through the same experience, and subscribe for more content that helps chosen ones understand the path God is guiding them through. Every like, every share, and every new subscriber helps this message reach someone who might need it today. And if something in this video resonated with you, leave a comment below and let others know you're part of this journey. Sometimes a single comment can remind someone else that they're not alone in what they're experiencing. Stay grounded, stay patient, and keep walking in the purpose God placed in your life. The people who are meant to walk beside you will recognize your light when they see it.